You know that moment when you're standing in a group and everyone is laughing, yet something in you stays quiet. Not because you don't get the joke, not because you're above it, but because you can feel the shape of what's happening underneath the laughter, the tiny distortion, the person who isn't there to defend themselves, the way the room subtly asks you to join in, not with words, but with your face, your silence, your willingness to let it pass, and you notice yourself doing something other people rarely notice they're doing. You pause. Later, you might replay it and wonder why it felt so hard to be normal, why it takes effort to play along with things that seem effortless for everyone else, why you can be surrounded by people and still feel like you're standing slightly to the side of the world. If this is familiar, there's a good chance you've been misunderstood for a long time, because from the outside, your hesitation can look like distance. Your quietness can get translated into judgment. Your unwillingness to go along can get labeled as rigid, cold, too serious, or the one that stings the most, difficult. And what's painful about those labels is that they treat your inner experience like a personality problem, when really it's a pattern, a consistent way your nervous system and your mind respond when something feels off, even if everyone else is acting like it's fine. It isn't a flaw, it's a kind of integrity response, and it shows up in one place more intensely than almost anywhere else: school. People don't talk about this plainly, but school isn't just classrooms and exams. It's a small social ecosystem, a place where belonging is constantly negotiated in tiny transactions. Who laughs, who agrees, who stays loyal to the group, even when the group is doing something ugly. So when you're someone with strong moral principles, someone who has a clear line inside of you about what feels wrong, you can end up with fewer friends, not because you don't want connection, not because you can't socialize, but because you can't always pay the entry fee that some social circles quietly require. There's more going on here than people realize. A lot of friendships in school are built less on deep compatibility and more on synchronization. People bond by mirroring each other, sharing opinions, sharing targets, sharing rules. Behavioral researchers have long noted that groups strengthen cohesion by creating an in-group, and often, by implication, an out-group. Sometimes that out-group is a rival class, sometimes it's a teacher, and sometimes it's one student who becomes the safest person to ridicule because everyone else is afraid of being the next one. If you've ever been in a room where a rumor spreads faster than any real information, you've seen this in motion. Not everyone believes it, not everyone likes it, but people participate anyway, because participation buys safety. Your brain understands this too. The social parts of the nervous system are designed to treat exclusion like danger. There are studies suggesting that social rejection activates some of the same pain circuitry as physical pain. That isn't poetic. It's your body doing what it evolved to do: keep you connected so you survive. So for most people in a high-pressure social environment, the path of least resistance is to blend, to nod, to laugh, to agree, to act like they don't see what they see. But for you, blending comes at a higher internal cost, because when your conscience lights up, it isn't just a thought, it's a sensation, a tightening, a heat, a subtle alarm. It's your system saying, if I do this, I won't feel like myself. And that creates a conflict that other people might not even notice they're avoiding: connection or self-respect, belonging or truth. In school, that conflict shows up everywhere. Someone tries to pull you into gossip that feels cruel, and you don't add fuel. You go quiet, or you change the subject, or you simply don't give them what they're asking, and suddenly the room cools toward you. Or everyone is planning to cheat, and you don't want to be part of it. You don't even have to report it. You just don't join. And somehow, your refusal gets interpreted as an accusation, as if your integrity is an attack on their choices. This is one of the most confusing parts. You can be doing nothing outwardly and still become the problem. But psychologically, it makes sense. When someone is cutting corners, lying, mocking, or performing loyalty they don't actually feel, your presence becomes a mirror. Not because you're trying to expose them, just because you exist without joining the performance. And mirrors make people uneasy when they're trying not to look at themselves, so they don't always hate you. Sometimes they fear what you represent, the possibility of being seen clearly. And in adolescent environment, where identity is still fragile and social ranking feels like life or death, People often protect themselves by pushing away whatever threatens the story they're telling about who they are. That's why the more clean and sincere you are, the more certain groups keep a cautious distance. Not because you're unlovable, but because sincerity is hard to manipulate. And people who rely on manipulation don't like environments where their methods stop working. This pattern rarely starts in school, though. School just amplifies. Often, strong moral principles develop in response to something earlier. An environment where trust was inconsistent, where adults said one thing and did another, where you had to become your own compass because the people around you weren't stable enough to be one. Sometimes it comes from being the kid who had to notice what others ignored, the kid who learned to scan for danger in tone, in silence, in shifting moods, the kid who learned that small violations, little lies, little cruelty weren't small, they were warning signs. Or maybe you grew up around chaos and your nervous system built a quiet rule. If I keep my integrity, if I stay honest, I stay grounded. If I don't become like them, I won't disappear inside the mess. In that sense, principled behavior can be more than ethics. It can be self-preservation, a way of staying intact. And that doesn't mean everyone who blends is weak, and it doesn't mean you're superior. It just means different people adapt to social environments in different ways. Some adapt by becoming flexible, reading the room, shaping themselves to fit. Others adapt by becoming steady, holding to an internal line, refusing to fragment. Neither strategy is morally better. They're different nervous system solutions to the same human need, to belong and to survive. But there is a trade-off that people don't talk about. When your sense of right and wrong is clear, it protects you from a certain kind of regret. You don't wake up years later with the sharp memory of laughing at someone's humiliation just to stay included. You don't carry the quiet shame of betraying yourself over and over until you can't recognize the person you are. That's the hidden strength. The quiet cost is that in the short term, you can look like an outsider. And here's the paradox. Sometimes the very thing that makes you a safe, loyal, deeply trustworthy friend in adulthood makes you harder to befriend in adolescence, because adolescence rewards speed over depth. It rewards social fluency over inner alignment. It rewards the ability to pretend you don't care, and you do care. You care in a way that isn't loud, but it's constant. You can't always join a group that bonds by tearing someone down. You can't always play along with dishonesty, even when it's just for fun. And you can't always give people the comfort of your agreement when agreement would cost you something inside. So you end up in the strange position of being lonely, not because you're closed off, but because you're careful with yourself. You're not friendless. You're discerning in an environment that often mistakes discernment for rejection. And that can be deeply painful because you still want connection. You still want someone to sit next to you and feel easy. You still want to be chosen. You still want to laugh without having to leave yourself behind to do it. If you're in that place, it's worth hearing this plainly. You're not broken. Your experience makes sense. It makes sense that you felt excluded when you didn't join the rumor. It makes sense that people called you pretentious when you didn't cheat. It makes sense that you felt like you had to choose between being liked and being honest. That choice is real, and you didn't imagine it. But it also isn't the whole story of you, because the part of you that won't compromise easily isn't a social defect. It's a form of self-trust. It's the ability to stay internally consistent when the world gets loud. And that quality tends to age well. As life gets bigger than school, the social incentives change. People start to look for friends who feel safe. People start to value someone who doesn't shift their values to match the room. People start to recognize how rare it is to be around someone who can disagree without becoming cruel, who can stay honest without needing to humiliate anyone, who can remain kind without being naive. And often, your kind of friendship doesn't arrive as a crowd. It arrives as a few people, the ones who feel relief in your presence, the ones who don't need you to pretend, the ones who recognize that your steadiness is not judgment, it's clarity. If this resonated, there may be another layer you've noticed too. The way you can read social dynamics almost instantly, and the way that ability sometimes makes you tired before a conversation even begins. If you've felt that, there's more to explore, not as a problem to fix, but as a way of finally understanding how your mind learned to keep you in